You don't wake up exhausted because you pushed too hard yesterday. You wake up exhausted because money woke up before you did. Already active, already calculating, already setting the limits of your day. It presses into your chest while you rinse your mouth. It rides with you through traffic. It lingers in every conversation as background noise while you smile, nod, and quietly count what's due next. You call this normal. You label it adulthood. You assume everyone carries this weight. But here's the truth most people avoid, because it exposes too much. Money doesn't just buy comfort. It dictates how much of your personality you're allowed to express. It decides whether you quit the job that's draining you, or stay agreeable while your ambition slowly dulls because your paycheck depends on obedience. It determines whether no feels safe or dangerous. It determines whether you leave a situation that erodes your confidence or tolerate it because rent, debt, and uncertainty have removed your leverage. This has nothing to do with motivation. It has everything to do with power. You don't feel poor because the numbers are low. You feel poor because your options are narrow. Real poverty shows up as silence, as letting comments slide, as a guy like Daniel, mid-30s, competent, reliable, staying quiet in meetings while less capable people speak freely, because stability feels safer than honesty. This isn't about wealth or status. It's about control over your own life. When money dictates your decisions, freedom becomes conditional. And the most dangerous part is how quietly that trade happens. Slowly enough that you convince yourself this is just reality. What you felt earlier wasn't burnout. It was a warning sign. The moment money starts dictating your choices, it doesn't stay in your wallet. It leaks into every ordinary second of your day. Money isn't a goal you chase. It's a weight you wake up under. It doesn't inspire action. It squeezes it out of you. You feel it in deadlines flashing on your screen, in unpaid bills sitting where calm should be, in that dull anxiety already vibrating in your body before breakfast. You don't obsess over money because you crave luxury. You obsess because it refuses to shut up. One unread message from your boss can flip your mood instantly. One bank alert can tighten your throat. One medical expense can wipe out months of discipline in a single afternoon. This is how control actually works, not with visible chains, but with constant threats you can't relax around. Think of James, 42, steady income, no bad habits, still one emergency away from spiraling. Or Sarah, who checks her balance before accepting a simple dinner invite because every choice now carries a silent price tag. This isn't fragility, it's exposure. When money is tight, everything feels urgent. You move faster than you want to. You agree before you've decided. You delay your own needs because survival always speaks louder than dignity. Money rarely destroys lives dramatically. It erodes them quietly, every morning, teaching you to call pressure normal and anxiety being an adult. Slowly, your world contracts. You stop asking what you want and start asking what you can afford. Emotionally, mentally, financially, that's when money stops being a tool and becomes a leash. And you only notice it when you try to step away. Daily money pressure doesn't announce what it's becoming. It just settles in, quietly, until one day you realize the real cost wasn't stress, it was dependence. And this is where Machiavelli stops being optional. He isn't relevant because he was cruel or clever, but because he named the rule people still live under without admitting it. Power belongs to the one who needs less. That's the whole equation. In offices, relationships, negotiations, the balance always tilts toward the person who can afford to walk away. Money accelerates that imbalance faster than almost anything else. When you're short on it, your life fills with permission seeking. You wait for your boss to approve time off. You hope clients don't disappear. You need the paycheck to land exactly on time so your life doesn't wobble. That needs reshaped behavior. You speak softer. You tolerate more. You call compliance professionalism because the alternative feels dangerous. Think of Brian, early 40s, experienced, competent, but careful with every word in meetings because one wrong tone risks stability. Or Emily, who swallows frustration daily, not because she agrees, but because missing one check would cost her sleep. This isn't a character flaw. It's exposure. Now notice what happens when even a small financial buffer appears. You pause before answering. You don't rush to please. You gain space to decide. And that space changes how people treat you. This is why money has never been just about comfort. It's about leverage. About reducing how much access others have to your fear. Machiavelli wasn't obsessed with wealth. He was focused on control, how it forms, and how quietly it transfers. This video doesn't promise escape or glorify money. It shows how dependence shrinks your world, how power is decided long before conflict, and why understanding this is how you stop giving up your choices by default. This is where Machiavelli's question becomes lethal. Because once money decides who needs who more, the fantasy of work harder and you'll be free turns into the perfect cage. It keeps dependent people running inside a system that never intended to let them leave. The most dangerous belief isn't cynical, it's comforting. Keep going. Be patient. Everything will work out. It sounds mature. It sounds responsible. It sounds like something good people tell themselves to survive disappointment. But it's wrong. Hard work doesn't create freedom. It builds tolerance. And tolerance is not control. Millions of people do everything right and still feel trapped. They arrive early, stay late, save carefully, avoid mistakes, follow rules, and wait. Nothing opens. They don't fail dramatically. They don't collapse. They just stay stuck, year after year, quietly confused about why effort never turns into relief. Take Daniel, 12 years in the same field. Reliable, promoted, savings account growing slowly. From the outside, he's a success. Ask one honest question. Can he walk away tomorrow? He can't. Not because he failed, but because the system only trained him to endure, not to exit. Or Maria, 15 years of work, never missed a payment, always dependable. She has savings, just not enough to buy courage. She stays where she's unhappy because stability feels safer than uncertainty. These people aren't lazy. They're loyal to a promise that was never real. The truth is brutal. Hard work keeps you alive, but it doesn't set you free. It pays bills, it earns approval, it keeps the lights on, but it rarely creates leverage. When all your income depends on showing up, your freedom vanishes the moment you stop. That isn't independence. It's conditional survival. And the cruel part is how invisible the trap feels. You're praised for discipline, respected for reliability, told you're doing well. Meanwhile, your options don't grow. Your life doesn't feel lighter. You just get stronger at carrying weight. That's why so many people with 10 or 15 years of experience still feel unsafe. They worked, but they didn't build. They saved, but not enough to leave. They invested time into something that doesn't belong to them. Deep down, they know it. That's why quitting feels terrifying. That's why imagining another path triggers panic. Effort kept them alive, but it never bought freedom. It brought dependence with better branding. Effort keeps you alive. Ownership decides how you live. Until something you build can run without you, hard work will always act like a leash, not choking you, just holding you close enough that you never leave, while you're told to be grateful for the cage. And this is why the promise you were taught, eventually collapses. Hard work fails for a reason most people never connect to power. Effort without ownership doesn't break dependence. It just trains you to survive inside it more efficiently. You become tougher, more disciplined, more exhausted, but you never become free. The cage doesn't disappear. You just learn how to function inside it without complaining. The question that actually matters was never how much you earn. It's whether the money still arrives when you don't. A paycheck feels like income, but in practice it behaves like permission. Permission to remain useful. Permission to follow rules you didn't design. Permission to keep your life stable only as long as you keep showing up. The moment you stop, the money stops. And with it, your sense of safety. That isn't freedom. That's dependence disguised as structure. Now, flip the lens. Imagine money that doesn't care where you are today. Money that doesn't ask if you clocked in. A small business that runs without constant supervision. A digital product that sells while you sleep. A piece of content that continues to attract attention. A system that still works when you step away. Ask yourself a simple question that cuts through all theory. If you disappear for a week, does the income pause, or does it continue? For most people, the answer is immediate and uncomfortable. Everything freezes. No hours worked, no money earned. That means their life is built on attendance, not control. This is the quiet dividing line between people who have leverage and people who don't. A paycheck rewards presence. Ownership rewards structure. When your income depends on permission, you live carefully. You wait for performance reviews. You worry about reorganizations. You lower your voice when something feels wrong because stability feels fragile. Your money depends on being needed, not on being free. But the moment you own even one small source, something changes internally first. The pressure eases. You don't negotiate from panic. You don't rush to please. You pause before answering. You choose instead of react. That shift alone alters how people treat you. This is why effort by itself disappoints so many intelligent, capable people. They work hard inside systems they don't own, then wonder why freedom never shows up. Income that disappears when you stop isn't income. It's rented time. And rented time can be taken back without warning. Ownership doesn't mean quitting tomorrow or gambling your future. It doesn't mean reckless exits or fantasies. It means building something that survives your absence. Something that compounds instead of resetting to zero every morning. A channel that keeps reaching people. A tool that keeps solving problems. A product that keeps delivering value. A process that keeps running without your constant presence. Control is not created by doing more. It's created by directing effort toward what you own. The people who escape aren't the most driven or the most exhausted. They're the ones who stopped asking how to earn more and started asking what could belong to them. That single question redraws the line between dependence and control. See it clearly. Choose deliberately. Build one source you own. Let it grow. Then watch how your decisions, your confidence, and your life begin to change. Once you move from earning to owning, something small but decisive shifts inside you. You stop forcing yourself to swim with the current and start choosing where to stand. And that choice quietly determines whether money keeps sliding past you or begins to collect. What prevents most people from ever making that shift isn't lack of talent, intelligence, or opportunity. It's fear. The most efficient control system ever created, precisely because it doesn't feel like control. It feels like being sensible, careful, realistic. Fear doesn't show up as panic. It speaks calmly, reasonably. It tells you to wait a little longer, to prepare more, to avoid rushing. And while you're waiting, life tightens its grip. Most people don't stay broke because they lack ideas. They stay broke because fear teaches them to delay action until momentum disappears. You see it everywhere. Someone considers starting a side project, selling a skill, testing a small business. Fear arrives dressed as logic. What if it fails? What if people laugh? What if you embarrass yourself? So they choose silence. They choose safety. They keep doing what feels acceptable, even when that safety slowly suffocates them. This isn't weakness, it's conditioning. Systems run best when people police themselves. Those who fear mistakes don't experiment. Those who fear judgment don't stand out. Those who fear embarrassment never build anything new. Fear keeps people predictable, and predictable people are easy to manage. That's why fear is cheaper than chains. Chains require force. Fear makes you stop yourself. No one has to say no because you already did it internally. Notice how often fear hides behind virtue. You call it responsibility when you don't try, humility when you don't promote yourself, patience when you're really just afraid to move. Meanwhile, time passes quietly. Bills increase, energy fades, and the window for risk slowly narrows. Fear doesn't ruin lives in one dramatic moment. It erodes them through thousands of small hesitations. The people who break out aren't fearless. They simply stopped listening. They learned that being laughed at costs less than staying trapped. That failing publicly hurts less than failing silently for decades. Fear never disappears. You don't conquer it. You outgrow letting it decide. And that moment changes everything. Because as long as fear controls your choices, money will always feel distant, not because you're incapable, but because fear keeps you dependent. Dependent on approval. Dependent on permission. Dependent on a life that never expands. The moment you see fear for what it really is, not a warning but a mechanism of control, you act anyway. And that is where poverty begins to loosen its grip. Not because you became reckless, but because you finally stopped letting fear choose your future. Fear locks most people into the flow by teaching them one lesson early in life. Don't stand out. The moment you accept that rule, you stop deciding where you belong and start inheriting whatever position is handed to you. This is where the misunderstanding about money begins. Money does not respond to effort the way we were promised it would. It doesn't care how long your day was or how drained you feel at night. Money responds to position. Picture rush hour traffic. Miles of cars packed together, engines hot, everyone inching forward, everyone busy, everyone frustrated. That's how most people approach money. They stay in the lane they were placed in. They match the speed around them. They follow signals they didn't design and convince themselves that movement equals progress. But movement inside traffic only guarantees one thing. You remain stuck in traffic. Now notice what most people never look at. On that same road, someone owns the toll booth. They aren't driving, they aren't late, they aren't stressed. Every car that passes sends money to them automatically. Same road, same volume, completely different result. One group spends energy, the other controls access. Fear is designed to keep this distinction invisible. Fear tells you to blend in, keep pace, don't question the road itself. Because the moment you question structure, effort loses its power as a virtue. So most people respond the same way. They work harder inside systems they don't control. Longer hours, more responsibility, more pressure, same direction, same ceiling. Effort feels productive, but without position, it only makes you exhausted in public. Money doesn't reward motion, it rewards placement. You see this pattern everywhere. People compete for raises instead of leverage. They chase promotions inside roles that were designed with limits. Meanwhile, Others step slightly to the side and build something connected to demand. A service people already need, a product tied to attention, a platform positioned where decisions move through. They aren't smarter. They aren't luckier. They're placed differently. Two people can work just as hard and end up in completely different worlds because one stays inside the stream while the other captures it. One reacts, one collects, one burns energy, one owns access. The internet made this impossible to ignore. Attention moves, demand moves, money follows both. Some people scroll endlessly, others publish, some consume, others control distribution. Same traffic, different roles. Exhaustion is not proof of progress. Often, it's proof you're standing in the wrong place. If money only appears when you push harder, your position is weak. If it disappears the moment you stop, placement is the issue. That isn't judgment, it's mechanics. Money follows position, not fatigue. This isn't about reckless quitting or chasing shortcuts. It's about asking a question fear never wants you to ask. Where is money already moving, and what role am I playing inside that movement? Am I just another car, or am I connected to the flow itself? Workers think in effort, builders think in access, owners think in position. The moment you stop asking how to work harder and start asking where to stand, money starts behaving differently around you. Not because you changed who you are, but because you changed where you are. The moment you step out of traffic and stop drifting with the flow, the reaction arrives faster than any result ever could. You don't need success for it to start. It begins the instant your position changes. As soon as your income increases, even slightly before anything impressive appears on the surface, the atmosphere around you shifts. People don't congratulate you. They study you. Conversations lose their ease. Jokes land sharper than before. Casual comments slip out. You're really focused on money now. You've changed. You're not the same anymore. These responses have very little to do with numbers or achievements. They are reactions to movement. When you earn more, you also need less. Less approval, less tolerance, less permission. You stop explaining every decision. You don't panic when plans fall apart. You don't agree just to keep things comfortable. That quiet independence unsettles people. Not because you became greedy, but because you became harder to predict. The version of you that depended on a paycheck, on validation, on stability at any cost, was easy to read. The version of you with options isn't. So the story changes. Boundaries get called selfishness. Focus gets labeled obsession. Discipline gets framed as coldness. What's actually happening is leverage disappearing. When you relied on them, they felt relevant. When you don't, they feel unnecessary. Independence breaks invisible agreements that were never spoken. Relationships built on convenience rather than respect. This resistance almost always shows up before any visible success, because people sense positional shifts long before they see outcomes. You didn't buy anything flashy. You didn't announce a win. You simply moved differently. You paused instead of rushing. You said no without apologizing. You chose instead of reacting. That alone is enough to create tension. Your independence feels like betrayal to people who benefited from your limits. Many stop here. They slow down. They justify themselves. They slip back into old habits to restore harmony. Not because they were wrong, but because approval felt safer than distance. The ones who continue learn something critical. You cannot reduce dependence without disrupting existing dynamics. You cannot change position without making others uncomfortable. And you cannot step out of traffic without being noticed. Money doesn't just create options, it exposes structure. It reveals who respected you and who merely tolerated you while you were manageable. This phase is unavoidable. It cannot be skipped or softened. The real question isn't whether people will react. They will. The question is whether you interpret their discomfort as a signal to retreat, or recognize it as proof that your position has already shifted. One response pulls you back into traffic. The other confirms that you've already stepped out. The resistance you noticed earlier wasn't coincidence. It was the earliest sign that something underneath you had started to move. When people react before results show up, it's because real wealth begins long before it can be measured or displayed. This is where most people get wealth wrong. They mistake the symbols for the substance. Cars, homes, titles, status, visibility. Those are loud and easy to recognize, but they are not the foundation. They are echoes. Real wealth lives somewhere quieter. It shows up in how your body responds when numbers become unstable, when income fluctuates, when certainty disappears. Wealth is not what you buy when everything works. It's how composed you remain when it doesn't. Watch what happens the moment financial pressure enters a room. A late payment creates panic. A slow month triggers anxiety. An unexpected expense collapses confidence. Sleep breaks. Decisions rush. Fear quietly takes the wheel again. That reaction reveals everything. The lifestyle may look solid, but the structure underneath is brittle. That isn't wealth. That's exposure. Real wealth doesn't remove risk. It reduces how much risk can control you emotionally. This is why two people earning the same amount can live entirely different internal lives. One feels chased by numbers, the other feels insulated. One checks balances obsessively, the other glances and continues. One negotiates from fear, the other waits. The difference isn't spending power, it's stability under pressure. Wealth is the ability to stay calm when income dips, when plans change, when the future isn't fully mapped. People chase money thinking it will finally make them feel safe. But safety doesn't come from more digits. It comes from reduced dependence, fewer fragile points, more breathing room. When you're wealthy in the real sense, volatility stops owning you. You don't accept bad terms out of panic. You don't stay where you don't belong to maintain an image. You don't over-explain to preserve comfort. Your nervous system stays steady, and that steadiness becomes leverage. This is also why loud displays often signal the opposite of wealth. Excessive flexing usually hides quiet insecurity. When someone needs constant proof that they're winning, it's often because internally they're not. Real wealth doesn't seek witnesses. It doesn't rush visibility. It prefers privacy over applause and control over validation. It buys options, not attention. And options change everything. Options let you pause. They let you walk away. They let you choose timing instead of reacting to pressure. Under financial strain, most people shrink. They compromise values. They accept disrespect. They silence themselves. Wealth reverses that pattern, not by making you superior, but by removing urgency. Urgency compresses people. Calm expands them. When you stay composed while others rush, you see more clearly, decide better, and avoid traps built on fear. That calmness isn't personality, it's position. Wealth is emotional stability under financial pressure. It's waking up without dread even when tomorrow is uncertain. It's knowing instability won't break you. Cars wear out. House age. Flex fades. But the ability to remain steady while the ground shifts is what separates those who feel free from those who only look successful. That is real wealth. and it reshapes how you move through the world long before it changes what the world sees. At this stage, there's nothing left to hype you up and nothing left to sell. You already recognize the problem. You felt it in your body, in your decisions, in that familiar hesitation that shows up exactly when it costs you the most. This was never about ambition, greed, or wanting more than others. It was always about control, about how often your life pauses to ask permission before it moves, about how many choices are quietly pre-decided by numbers you claim not to worry about, but still obey. So here is the only question that actually matters, and it isn't comfortable. If nothing changes, if you keep earning, but never owning, if you keep moving, but never choosing your position, where does that road lead? 5 years from now? 10 years from now? Does your world expand? Or does it repeat itself with better justifications and heavier fatigue? This is not a motivational speech. There is nothing to rush into and nothing to prove. There is only clarity. Clarity that money itself is not the goal, but dependence is the risk. Clarity that effort without control produces endurance, not freedom. And clarity that no one is coming to loosen this grip for you. Not your employer, not the system, not time. Money will not magically make you powerful, but lacking it will quietly guarantee that you always need permission. Permission to rest. Permission to leave. Permission to say no. And the longer you delay seeing this clearly, the more life decides for you by default. The question isn't whether change is possible. It's whether repeating this pattern is a future you're willing to live inside.